The hall looked like it belonged to another world. Tall walls rose high above the guests, painted in soft colors that reflected the warm lights hanging from the ceiling. The lights did not shine too bright or too dim. They glowed gently, like they were meant to make everyone look a little better than they felt. Round tables filled the space, dressed in white cloth and set with glasses that caught every sparkle of light. People arrived in pairs and small groups. Their voices mixed together, forming a low, steady sound. Some laughed loudly. Some spoke in calm, careful tones. Many smiled, though not all smiles reached the eyes. This was a place where people wanted to be seen, near the side entrance. A waitress waited for the signal to begin. Her uniform was clean and simple. Nothing about it stood out. She liked it that way. She smoothed the front of her shirt and took a quiet breath. She had worked many events like this before, but tonight felt different. She could not say why. There was a weight in the air that pressed lightly on her chest. When the signal came, she picked up her tray and stepped into the room. She moved with care, walking between tables without drawing attention. She knew how to do that. Years of work had taught her how to read a room, how to move around people without being noticed. She poured drinks, placed plates, and nodded politely when someone looked her way. Some guests thanked her. Some did not. She did not take it personally. People were here for themselves, not for her, as she passed the center of the hall. Her eyes lifted for a moment toward the stage. A large piano rested there, smooth and dark, its surface shining under the lights. The bench stood empty in front of it. The piano looked calm, almost peaceful, like it was waiting. She felt something stir inside her, then quickly looked away. At one of the largest tables sat a group of well-dressed guests. Their voices carried farther than the others. They leaned close together, laughing easily. One man stood out. He wore confidence like a coat. He spoke with his hands, flashing a watch that looked heavy and bright. The waitress approached the table to refill glasses. She focused on the bottle in her hand. Careful not to spill a drop, the man noticed her then. He leaned back in his chair and looked her up and down. Not with anger, but with amusement. "Tell me," he said, loud enough for those around him to hear. "Do you enjoy this kind of work?" The question caught her off guard. She paused just long enough to feel the room tilt slightly. "I do my job," she replied softly. He smiled wider. "That wasn't the question," he said. "I mean, is this where you thought you'd end up?" A few people at the table laughed. Not all of them, but enough. The waitress felt heat rise to her face. She kept her eyes on the glass she was filling. "I'm fine." "Thank you," she said, and placed the glass down. The man laughed again. "Fine," he repeated. "That's one way to see it." More laughter followed. Someone added a comment about hard work and choices. The words blurred together. The message was clear enough. The waitress picked up her tray and stepped away. Her steps felt heavier now. She walked toward the service area near the wall, where the noise faded a little. She set the tray down and rested her hands on the edge of the counter. Her fingers trembled. She told herself it did not matter. People like him said things like that all the time. It said more about them than about her. Still, the words had found their way in. They always did. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed slowly until her hands steadied. From where she stood, she could see the piano again. It felt strange how her eyes kept returning to it, as if something invisible pulled them there. The piano did not belong to her world anymore. That was something she had accepted long ago, or at least she thought she had. A memory slipped in without asking. A small room, worn keys. Long hours spent alone, letting sounds speak when words failed. She pushed the memory aside. This was not the time. "Everything okay?" Another server asked quietly as they passed. She nodded. Yes. She picked up her tray and returned to the floor. The event moved on. Guests talked about business, travel, success. Stories floated through the air, polished and proud. The waitress listened without meaning to. Everyone seemed certain of who they were and where they belonged. At the loud table, the man continued to hold attention. He spoke about opportunity and effort, about climbing higher. People nodded, impressed. The waitress returned to clear empty glasses. As she reached for one, the man leaned forward. "You know," he said, glancing toward the stage, "this place could use better entertainment." She froze, her hands still on the glass. He continued, smiling. "Something more refined. Something that fits the room." His eyes flicked to her for just a second. "This isn't exactly a place for beginners." The room went quiet around the table. Not silent, but different. A few guests shifted in their seats. Someone looked away. The laughter did not come this time. The waitress lifted the glass and placed it on her tray. She did not look at him. "I'll get out of your way," she said calmly, and walked off. Her heart beat fast. Not with fear, but with something closer to pain. She had learned how to swallow words, how to smile and move on. But this felt deeper, like being reduced to a single moment, a single role. She stood near the wall again, her back straight, her face calm. Inside, thoughts rushed and tangled. She wondered how someone could speak about respect and success, yet forget kindness so easily. She wondered if he had ever felt unseen. Her gaze drifted back to the stage. The piano seemed closer now, though it had not moved. The lights above it glowed warmly, as if inviting another memory surfaced. A time when music had been the only thing that made sense. When the world felt loud and unfair, and the keys offered a way through. She had once believed music could take her anywhere. Life had taught her otherwise. Or so she thought. A voice pulled her back. "We're running a little behind," the manager whispered. "The performer hasn't arrived yet." A soft wave of confusion spread through the guests. People checked their watches. The low sound of talking grew restless. The man at the loud table sighed. "Unbelievable," he said. "This is what happens when things aren't handled properly." The waitress felt the words press down on her again. She stood still, her tray empty, her hands free. For the first time that night, she was not rushing anywhere. There was nothing she needed to carry, nothing she needed to serve, just space. Her eyes returned to the piano. Her chest tightened, then loosened, like a door opening slowly. She told herself to stay where she was. This was not her place. She was here to work, not to dream. People like her did not step onto stages like that, but the pull remained. The host spoke quietly with staff near the stage. The pause stretched longer than planned. Guests shifted, waiting. The waitress took one step forward without thinking. Then she stopped. Her heart beat so loud, she was sure others could hear it. She looked down at her uniform, at her hands. Hands that had carried trays all night. Hands that once knew every key without looking. She looked up again. The piano waited. The noise of the room faded into a low hum. She could feel every breath she took. Every second felt heavier than the last. Behind her, the man's voice rose again, sharp with impatience. "Is something going to happen? Or should we all just sit here?" Something inside her settled. She took another step forward. No one stopped her. The distance between her and the stage felt long, but she crossed it slowly, steadily. Each step felt like leaving something behind. Fear, doubt, years of silence. She reached the edge of the stage and paused. The hall seemed to hold its breath. She looked at the piano one more time, her heart full and unsteady, and then she lifted her foot, ready to step up. She stood at the edge of the stage, her heart beating so hard it felt like it might escape her chest. For a brief second, she wondered what she was doing. The room was full of people who did not know her. People who had already decided who she was, just by looking at her uniform. Her legs felt weak, and her hands were cold. She could still walk away. No one had stopped her yet, but then she looked at the piano again. It was right there, close enough to touch, quiet, patient. She took one more step and climbed onto the stage. Low sound moved through the hall. Not applause. Not anger. Just surprise. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Even the staff froze where they stood. The host looked confused but said nothing. Maybe they thought she had been sent. Maybe they were too shocked to react. She walked slowly toward the piano. Each step felt heavy, but also clear. like she was finally walking where she was meant to be. She reached the bench and paused. Her reflection stared back at her from the piano's smooth surface. She barely recognized herself. She placed her hands on the bench and sat down. Someone in the crowd laughed softly, unsure. Another person whispered something. The wealthy man leaned forward, his smile thin and curious now. "Is this a joke?" he muttered. She did not hear him. Or maybe she did, but it no longer mattered. She lifted her hands and held them above the keys. They shook. Just a little. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. For a moment, there was nothing. Then her fingers touched the keys. The first note was soft. So soft that some people wondered if they had imagined it. Then came another, and another. Slow and careful, like she was testing the ground beneath her feet. The sound spread through the hall. People stopped moving. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Chairs stopped creaking. The room began to listen. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. They moved gently at first, then with more trust. The notes began to connect, forming something warm and familiar. A simple melody, honest and clear. The waitress leaned into the music. She was no longer thinking about the crowd, or the words that had been thrown at her earlier. She was thinking about long nights in quiet rooms, about loss and hope, about all the things she had never said out loud. The piano carried it all. The melody grew stronger. It filled the space between the walls and rose toward the high ceiling. It did not rush. It did not show off. It spoke. Faces in the crowd changed. Some leaned forward. Some sat back, their eyes wide. A few people pressed their lips together, holding feelings they did not expect to feel. The wealthy man's smile faded. He sat still now, his hands folded, his eyes fixed on the stage. She played on. The music shifted, moving from soft to powerful, from careful to brave. Her fingers moved with purpose, each note falling exactly where it belonged. It sounded like a story being told without words. People forgot about time. The waitress felt something open inside her, a place she had kept closed for too long. With every note, she felt lighter, stronger, like she was finally allowed to be herself again. Tears filled her eyes. But she did not stop. In the crowd, a woman lifted her hand to her mouth. A man wiped his eyes quickly and looked away. Someone near the back whispered, "She's incredible." The music reached its highest point, full and deep, then slowly began to fall. The notes softened, like a long breath being let out. Her hand slowed, guiding the melody gently toward its end. The final note lingered in the air. Then silence. For one heartbeat. No one moved. Then the room erupted. Applause burst from every corner of the hall. People stood to their feet without thinking. The sound was loud and real and full of awe. It was not polite clapping. It was the kind that comes from deep inside. The waitress sat still, stunned. Her hands rested on her lap. She looked out at the crowd, unsure of what to do. The host was the first to step forward. That was unforgettable, they said, her voice unsteady. The applause continued. She stood slowly and bowed her head, not sure how else to respond. Her face burned, but this time it was different. This time the warmth felt earned. As she turned to leave the stage, she saw the wealthy man standing. His hands clapped too, but slower than the rest. His face had changed. The confidence was still there, but something else sat behind it now. When the noise finally softened, the room buzzed with emotion. People talked excitedly, pointing toward the stage. Some looked at the waitress with new eyes. She stepped down from the stage and returned to the floor, her legs shaking. The manager rushed toward her, shock and pride mixed together. "I had no idea," they said softly. She nodded. Neither did most people. The rest of the night felt different. Guests spoke to her with respect. Some thanked her. Others asked questions, but kindly. The uniform no longer felt invisible. It felt like just another part of her, not the whole story. As the crowd began to leave, the wealthy man approached her. He stood awkwardly, his voice lower than before. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I was wrong." She looked at him, searching his face. She saw discomfort there, and something close to humility. I judged you without knowing anything, he continued. Your music. It reminded me of things I forgot. She nodded once. That happens, she said simply. He opened his mouth as if to say more, then closed it. Thank you, he said, and walked away. When the hall finally emptied, the lights dimmed. Chairs were stacked. The noise faded into echoes. The waitress stood alone for a moment. Looking at the piano one last time, she did not know what would come next. She did not know if her life would change overnight, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never again believe she was small just because others could not see her. She took off her apron, folded it neatly, and smiled. Some stories begin in silence, and some are finally heard.